Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Sciences, SOSS, Diploma Programmes, Postgraduate Diploma in Disaster Management, PGDDM, MPA-001 Understanding Natural Disasters, Unit-1 Understanding Natural Disasters. 1.0 Learning Outcome. After studying this unit, you should be able to understand the meaning and nature of natural disasters. Explain the types of natural disasters in India with special reference to their regional and seasonal distributions. Discuss the effects of such disasters, and describe briefly the efforts to mitigate disasters. 1.1 Introduction. Natural disasters, which are often sudden and intense, result in considerable destruction, injuries and deaths, disrupting normal life as well as the process of development. Increasing population and various other socio-economic factors have forced people to live in vulnerable areas. Natural disasters are perceived to be on the increase in their magnitude, frequency, and economic impact. Its unique geoclimatic conditions make the Indian region particularly vulnerable to natural disasters. Floods and high winds account for around 60% of all disasters. About 54% of the subcontinent's landmass is vulnerable to earthquakes, while about 4 crore hectares, that is about 1 to 2% of the country, is vulnerable to periodic floods. The total expenditure on relief and reconstruction in Gujarat alone after the severe earthquake of January 201 has been about Rs. 1,500 crore in that year. Just to quote an example, new disaster threats have also developed, such as the tsunami disaster of December 2004, which was an unprecedented natural disaster. In this unit, we will discuss the meaning and nature of natural disasters. In addition, their effects will also be highlighted. Keeping in view the variety of natural disasters that occur in India, we will explain the types with special reference to their regional and seasonal distributions. Lastly, we will deal with efforts to mitigate natural disasters. 1.2 Natural disasters, meaning and nature. A natural disaster could occur due to an immediate extreme event, or it could be the result of a long-duration process, which disrupts normal human life in its established social, traditional and economic system to a considerable extent. The United Nations define it as the occurrence of a sudden or major misfortune which disrupts the basic fabric and normal functioning of a society or community. Today, the term disaster is commonly used to denote any extreme event, be it natural or man-made, which brings about loss of life, property, infrastructure, essential services and means of livelihood to an extent that it becomes difficult to cope with the situation due to it being beyond the normal capacity of the affected communities to deal with unaided. A hazardous situation turns into a disaster event when the affected community, or district or state or country, needs immediate and prolonged assistance and support to deal with the situation and its after effects. Thus, a disaster is the culmination of a hazard in a situation where the impact is accentuated by the vulnerability of the community. To be more specific, a hazard may be regarded as an disaster situation, in which some risk of disaster exists. In fact, hazards can be posed both by natural phenomena and by man-made events. By the same definition, disasters can be natural or man-made. The man-made disasters will be covered in Course 2, and here we will confine ourselves to the study of natural disasters. It may be noted at this stage that the severity of a disaster is assessed on the basis of disruption to the normal pattern of life, impacts like loss of life and property, injury, hardship and adverse effects on health, community needs, especially shelter, food, clothing, medical assistance and social care, damage to infrastructure, buildings, communications, and the requirements of rehabilitation. The misery of the affected community is usually increased by poverty, high population density, weak infrastructure, proximity to rivers, seas or mountains, lack of cooperation within the community and poor governance. 1.3 Types of natural disasters in India. As already mentioned in section 1.1 above, India's unique geoclimatic position makes the country particularly vulnerable to natural disasters. India is a vast peninsula of subcontinental size and is surrounded by sea on 3 sides and has the Himalayan range on the 4th side, which has some of the tallest mountains of the world. That is why India has to face a very large variety of disastrous events of geological, oceanic or climatic origin. Thus we can list the natural disasters expected in India on the basis of their origin as follows. Wind and underwater-related natural disasters. Floods. Droughts. Cyclones. Tsunami. Climate-related disasters. Heat and cold waves. Global warming. Sea level rise. Ozone depletion. Mountain area disasters. Landslides. Snow avalanches. Geological disasters. Earthquakes. Volcanic eruptions. This is a broad classification, although one can suggest a different categorization. For example, a tsunami can be considered to be of geological origin, but it has been put under the water-related category in the above classification because the disastrous effect is caused by the giant sea waves. Each of these phenomena are explained and discussed in detail in the subsequent units of this course. However, at this introductory stage, brief descriptions are given here beginning with disasters of geological origin. 1. Earthquake. A sudden geological event below the surface of the earth results in generation of waves that travel far and wide and cause vertical and horizontal vibrations. The consequential motion causes destruction. The severity of the impact depends on the magnitude of the earthquake, which in turn depends on the amount of energy released at the spot where the geological event took place below the surface of the earth. Earthquakes occur suddenly, and thus there is no dependable technique for prediction of earthquakes as yet. India is highly vulnerable to earthquakes and has been visited by some very severe earthquakes, which are mentioned in the following table. Table 1.1 Damaging earthquakes in India since 1950. Year, regions and depths. 1950, Assam -1,500. 1988, North Bihar, 1,300. 1993, Maraiyawada, 10,000. 2001, Gujarat, 18,250. 2. Volcanic eruption. Volcano can be described as a vent or chimney to the Earth's surface from a reservoir of molten rock, called magma, deep in the crust of the Earth. It is not that volcanoes are always emitting lava, steam or smoke. Many volcanoes have been sleeping for decades or even longer. In the context of forecasting of volcanic eruptions, it can be stated that short-term forecasts within hours or days may be made through volcano monitoring techniques. In the Indian territory, there are only 2 volcanoes, viz., Narcondam and Barren Island, both in the Andamans. Both are sleeping volcanoes, although the Barren Island volcano emits some heat and smoke occasionally and goes to sleep again. In any case, there is no evidence of any serious damage by these volcanoes in the known past. Thus, India is not much affected due to volcanoes. However, other countries like Italy, Japan, Mexico, Indonesia and Iceland are worst affected. 3. Landslides. Landslides are defined as the mass movement of rock debris or mud down a slope and have come to include a broad range of motions, whereby falling, sliding and flowing under the influence of gravity dislodges earth material. They also occur as secondary effects of heavy rainstorms, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. In almost all cases, landslides occur as a consequence of changes, either sudden or gradual, in the composition and structure of rocks or vegetation on a slope, which loosens the soil over rocks which slide on a trigger such as heavy rains or vibrations in the Earth's surface. Landslide can be caused by poor ground conditions, geomorphic phenomena, heavy rainfall, earthquakes or undercutting of the base of slopes by rivers, and quite often due to heavy spells of rainfall coupled with impeded drainage. They are common in mountainous areas, such as Himalayas and the Western Ghats, where they frequently destroy the infrastructure, agriculture, and dwellings, resulting in considerable loss of life and property besides blocking vital roads in the inaccessible areas. 4. Snow avalanche. An avalanche is defined as the event in which a large mass of snow, ice, rock or other material moves swiftly down a mountainside or over a precipice and crushes everything in its path. An avalanche starts when the large mass of snow, ice and rock overcomes the frictional resistance of the sloping surface, either due to rain, melting of ice base or vibrations of any kind. It will be seen that landslides and avalanches are events of mountain regions and are rather similar in nature and impact. The basic difference is that landslide involves movement of rock, soil and mud, whereas an avalanche comprises snow, ice and rock. Landslides can occur in smaller hills or rocky slopes, but avalanches occur in high mountains with snow in abundance. 5. Tsunami. Tsunami is a Japanese term for sea waves generated by undersea earthquakes. These waves may originate from undersea or coastal seismic activity, or volcanic eruption. Whatever may be the catalyst, sea water is displaced into a violent and sudden motion, ultimately breaking over land even at very long distances with great destructive power. It is to be noted that while the coasts are hit by very high waves of water, there is hardly any appreciable wave on the high seas. Therefore, ships on the high seas are not affected. In most cases, tsunami could be the after effect of undersea earthquake, due to which the abrupt vertical movement of ocean floor generates waves, which travel at high speed in the ocean. As they approach land, their speed decreases while their height increases. It can be highly destructive to coastal areas, as was witnessed during the catastrophic tsunami event in December 2004. 6. Cyclone. Tropical cyclones are characterized by destructive winds and copious rainfall, which causes flooding. In such storms, winds can exceed speeds of over 120 km/h. Due to such strong wind forcing, sea water accumulates ahead of the cyclone as it moves towards the coast. When a cyclone hits the coast, the accumulated enormous mass of sea water strikes the coast as a giant sea wave called a storm surge, which can have heights of the order of tens of meters. The storm surge, with torrential rains and very strong winds, brings widespread devastation to coastlines and islands lying in their paths. Cyclones pose a major threat to life and property. These storms are called cyclones in India. In other parts of the world, they have different nomenclature, like hurricanes in America and typhoons in Japan. Tropical cyclones are weather systems with strong winds that circulate anti-clockwise around a low-pressure area in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. They form in certain tropical areas over the open seas where the sea surface temperature is around 26 Celsius. The necessary atmospheric and oceanic conditions for the formation of cyclone are a warm sea temperature, high relative humidity, atmospheric instability, and a location around at least 4-5 degree latitude away from the equator. In India, there are two cyclone seasons, viz., pre-monsoon, April and May, and post-monsoon, October and November. More cyclones form in the Bay of Bengal than in the Arabian Sea. As cyclones move generally westwards or northwestwards, the east coast of India is more vulnerable to cyclones than the west coast. 7. Flood. Flood denotes inundation or accumulation of water. In other words, it results from an imbalance between inflow and outflow of water. Floods can occur through heavy rains, dam failures, rapid snow melts, river blockages, or even bursting of water mains. Floods result in damage, deaths and injuries, and create problems in drinking water supply and food shortages. In India, 40 million hectare area is vulnerable to floods, and about 8 million hectare area is affected by floods annually. Thus, India is highly prone to floods, especially in the monsoon and cyclone seasons. The Mumbai flood disaster of July 2005 is fresh in memory. There are three types of floods: i.e., flash floods, river floods, and coastal floods. Flash floods are generally events of hill areas where sudden very heavy rain over a limited area can cause strong flow. Flash floods also occur when a temporary blockage in hilly areas impounds water, which when released suddenly creates the havoc. River floods occur due to heavy inflow of water from heavy rainfall, snowmelt, and short intense storms. Hoarding in rivers is also caused by inadequate capacity within the banks of the river to contain high flows, river bank erosion and silting of riverbeds, synchronization of flood in the main and tributary rivers, and flow retardation due to tidal and backwater effects. Coastal floods are caused due to tsunami or heavy rainfall from cyclones and the storm surge associated with the cyclone. The situation could be aggravated due to high tide. Tidal flooding is saline from the backflow of seawater into coastal rivers at high tides. Flood due to storm surge is also saline and therefore more corrosive. 8. Drought. Drought is a temporary reduction in water availability on an area for an unusually long period. Depending on the resulting water scarcity, a drought has disastrous and long-term socio-economic impacts, which may last for months and in some cases years. It is a slow-onset phenomenon. Three types of droughts are recognized. Meteorological drought, when the monthly or seasonal rainfall over an area is appreciably below normal. Hydrological drought, when the water scarcity over an area results in reduction in the available water in surface water bodies and the water table also recedes. Needless to state, prolonged meteorological drought leads to hydrological drought. Agricultural drought, when the water scarcity results in partial or total loss of crops and affects agricultural activity adversely. Drought is generally caused by adverse water balance, or scarcity of water to satisfy the normal needs of agriculture, livestock or human population. It can also occur in areas that normally enjoy adequate rainfall and moisture levels. Drought may be caused due to excessive evapotranspiration losses, high temperature and low soil holding capacity. Prolonged drought can result in aridity or even desertification when the exceptionally dry soil can no longer sustain any biological activity, whether organisms or vegetation. 9. Heat wave and cold wave. As the name implies, these are spells of extreme surface air temperatures over a region for rather prolonged periods of several days or few weeks. When the maximum temperature in the day over an area overshoots in the hot weather months, March to June, it leads to heat wave. Similarly, when the minimum temperature falls appreciably below normal in the winter months, it is called cold wave. Both phenomena are extreme weather events and lead to very considerable discomfort, illness, epidemics and deaths due to exposure. 10. Global warming. Increase in greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide and others, retards cooling of the Earth's surface at nights, and this tends to increase the minimum temperature, the morning temperature, almost all over the globe, resulting in the phenomenon called global warming. Even though the increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is due mostly to human activities, it is advisable to study global warming as a natural disaster because it involves the atmosphere in general and is global in nature, and its impacts are global even if the human activity is local or regional. The same argument applies in treating sea level rise and ozone depletion under the category of natural disasters. It may be noted that there would not only be less cooling of the Earth's surface at night, but the atmosphere will also get warmer due to trapping of the heat on account of greenhouse effect. All these aspects will be discussed in detail in Unit 18 later. 11. Sea level rise. Any increase in the average temperature of the Earth is bound to have two impacts. Firstly, the glaciers, permafrost, ice caps on the poles and mountain peaks will witness increased melting and consequent increase in the waters in rivers and oceans. Secondly, the large body of water in the seas will expand in volume due to increased temperature. Both these factors will create a rise in the level of water in the seas and oceans, which eventually poses serious problems to the inhabitants of coastal and island areas and affects their socio-economic well-being. In fact, sea level rise threatens the very existence of numerous islands and coastal zones. 12. Ozone depletion. Ozone, which is an isotope of oxygen, is created in the lower stratosphere where under conditions of higher atmospheric pressure, the ultraviolet radiation in the sun's rays breaks the oxygen molecule into atomic oxygen, which combines with oxygen molecule to form ozone. The ultraviolet radiation breaks up the ozone molecule into a normal oxygen molecule and atomic oxygen. Thus the process goes on and creates a layer of ozone in the upper atmosphere with maximum density of ozone around 20 kilometers or so above the Earth. This process also consumes a large part of the harmful ultraviolet radiation in the sun's rays and thus saves human, animal, and plant life on the Earth from the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. However, certain chemicals, in use on Earth, send chlorine up in the upper atmosphere where under certain conditions of low temperature and darkness, chlorine consumes atomic oxygen in a chemical reaction with the result that ozone formation is reduced, thus lowering the ozone density in the so-called ozone layer in the upper atmosphere. This process of ozone depletion ensures that less amount of the ultraviolet radiation in the sun's rays gets consumed in the ozone layer and more ultraviolet radiation reaches the Earth's surface to create harm. The entire process of ozone depletion and its effects are more complicated than the simple description above. Moreover, significant success has been made in combating ozone depletion through international cooperation. All these aspects will be discussed in detail in Unit 20, which is entirely devoted to ozone depletion. 1.4 Disaster Profile of India, Regional and Seasonal. As already stated at the beginning of the previous section, India is highly vulnerable to all types of natural disasters with the possible exception of volcanic eruptions, about which also we cannot afford to be complacent. The natural disasters take place with various intensities and in different regions due to unique and widely varying climatic, geographical and geological conditions. Therefore, there is a significant regional and seasonal aspect in the occurrence of natural disasters in India. In this part of the unit, we will concentrate on the pattern of regional and seasonal occurrence of natural disasters in the country. However, earthquakes are in a class by themselves. While they do exhibit a regional profile with the Himalayan belt, Kutch, Sundarbans and Andaman and Nicobar Islands being most vulnerable, and peninsular part of the country being less vulnerable, earthquakes do not exhibit a seasonal profile for the simple reason that this phenomenon is not climate-related.
1. Regional disaster profile of India. North India, comprising the Himalayan mountainous region and the Indo-Gangetic plains, has highly variable topography with some of the tallest mountains and perennial rivers. Its northern no-st boundary also happens to be the zone of collision of two major tectonic plates, viz., the Indian plate and the Asian plate. The area also has many geological faults. North India is also characterized by spells of hot, cold and rainy weather, and these attributes can vary within wide limits, creating unusual situations. As a result of these characteristic geographical, climatic, and geological features, North Indian states, J&IC, HP, Punjab, Haryana, Uttaranchal, Delhi, UP, Bihar, are visited by natural disasters in the form of earthquakes, landslides, avalanches, floods, droughts, heat and cold waves. The location and climate of East and Northeast India, W.B., Sikkim, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, Meghalaya, Tripura, Mizoram, are such that these states are visited by earthquakes, landslides, floods, and droughts. West Bengal can be affected by cyclones also. The central parts of the country, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, MP, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Goa, have a highly variable rainfall regime, both in time and space. Therefore, floods and droughts are major disasters in the area. Orissa, and Gujarat suffer heavily from cyclones. Although Goa and Maharashtra escaped the fury of cyclones, they suffer from heavy to very heavy rain fury due to the combined effect of depressions and the topography of the Western Ghats, which are ISO creates landslides. In recent years, Orissa has suffered considerably from heat waves. The peninsular India, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, suffers mainly from cyclones, floods and droughts. While Kerala escapes the fury of cyclones, it suffers from earthquakes and landslides in addition to floods and droughts. The Telangana and Rayalaseema areas of Andhra Pradesh are highly rain-deficient areas and therefore suffer drought conditions often. Among the island groups, Andaman and Nicobar Islands are vulnerable to earthquakes, heavy rains and occasionally cyclones. Andaman Islands also have two sleeping volcanoes, Narkandam and Barren Island, of which Barren Island volcano occasionally shows some mild short-duration activity which has not proved harmful so far. The Lakshadweep Islands are coral islands and therefore are only a few centimeters above the sea level. In the event of a significant sea level rise as a result of global warming, the Y could be threatened. In case there is a significant sea level rise in the coming decades, uncertainties prevail. MNLCH of the large coastline of India may be threatened by the rising sea. This could threaten some of India's biggest cities like Kolkata, Chennai, and Mumbai, which are commercial hubs. The December 2004 experience of tsunami has made the entire coastline, especially the eastern coast, of the country vulnerable to this serious disaster, which might be rare in occurrence but is extremely destructive. 2. Seasonal disaster profile of India. From the climatic point of view, India experiences 4 distinct seasons as follows. Winter season, December, January and February. Pre-monsoon or hot weather season, March, April and May. Monsoon season, June to September. Post-monsoon season, October, November. The natural disasters that occur in different parts of India are indicated below, season-wise. But it should be noted that earthquake and tsunami have no seasonal aspect and can occur any time. Winter season, December, January and February. During these months, Himalayan ranges receive copious amounts of rain and snow, and the weather phenomena known as western disturbances also bring in strong winds with rain, which at times can be heavy. Hence, the mountainous areas of North India are prone to snow avalanches and landslides. In the aftermath of rainy spells in this cold season, 1 or 2 spells of cold waves occur usually. Heavy fog, at times for days together, creates aviation hazard, and hail damages crops and orchards in the plains of North India. Pre-monsoon or hot weather season, March to May. Cyclones take shape over the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea and move westward or northwestward. Thus the eastern coast is more vulnerable to cyclones and accompanying storm surges. The cyclones that generate in the Arabian Sea move west or northwestwards, thus sparing the west coast but pose serious risk to the oil exploration outfits in the Arabian Sea. If a cyclone recurves, it affects Gujarat adversely and gives considerable rains in Rajasthan as well and creates floods sometimes. Monsoon season, June to September. Generally, this is the flood season for the entire country and floods occur wherever monsoon becomes more active. Conversely, the areas where the monsoon remains weak suffer from drought in this season. Landslides are a common feature in the hilly areas of Himalayas from Jharkhand to the northeastern states. Landslides also occur in the Western Ghats and in the hilly areas of Kerala in this season. Post-monsoon season, October and November. This is again a cyclone season when cyclones generate in the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea and move west or northwestwards in the same general fashion as in the pre-monsoon season. But the cyclonic activity is usually more pronounced in this post-monsoon season as compared to that in the pre-monsoon season. This is also the season when the southern states of Andhra Pradesh, coastal areas, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala receive considerable rainfall from the northeast monsoon, and are therefore vulnerable to the threat of floods. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn IGNOU. 1.5 Effects of Disasters. It is common knowledge that natural disasters have catastrophic effects on the place and people who are unfortunate enough to come within their field of strike. The adverse impacts are much more in the developing countries with a large population and high vulnerability in terms of weak infrastructure and poor support systems. Disasters not only do enormous damage, cause deaths, destroy food sources, spread disease and epidemics and create unemployment, but they unsettle the entire rhythm of life of the affected community, or state or country, for a long time. It requires enormous physical, financial and motivational resources to bring the impoverished and demoralized community back on rails. As most of the natural disasters occur suddenly or with short notice, direct effects include damage to houses, equipments, crops, infrastructure, bridges and roads, and loss of life. Malnutrition, disease and migration are the indirect effects. Economic impact can be seen in the form of emergency relief costs to individuals, care for evacuees, clean up after flood or clearance after landslides or avalanches, and wages and sales lost due to business interruption. As a result, timely repair, replacement, and reconstruction divert the national resources. The slow onset disasters are slow in materializing and showing their effects, such as prolonged droughts and resultant crop failure. The situation may further deteriorate with time if a drought is allowed to continue without adequate response. The affected area may also be very large in a continuing disaster, such as drought. This compounds long-standing problems of deforestation, encroaching, desertification and soil degradation over vast stretches of land if these pre-exist. In such a situation, agriculture suffers severe setback and large groups of affected people migrate in search of employment opportunities, which cause pressure on neighboring areas, resulting in conflict situations. Antisocial practices such as hoarding of essential goods and price escalation also create law and order problems. Malnutrition becomes rampant. Thus, disasters disrupt social life and economic activities. The damage and rehabilitation work after the disasters generally halts developmental activities. Because of the circumstances in the aftermath of disasters, the human and financial resources earmarked for development have to be shifted to relief and rehabilitation, at least partly if not fully. The impact of disasters on a disadvantaged section of the society are all the more severe and threaten their survival if they were lucky to escape death or serious injury. Their meager belongings may be wiped out by disasters. In such situations, they migrate to urban centers in search of livelihood, which tends to increase the difficult urban plight. The physically weak groups, including children, pregnant and lactating mothers, the aged and the infirm, are the worst sufferers in such circumstances. As disasters affect the economy and development of a country, any action that can be taken to reduce disaster-related loss must be seen as logical and desirable, in fact essential. This applies to all countries, and it underlines the need for all countries to try to evolve and maintain an effective disaster management capability appropriate to their needs. It also emphasizes the necessity for cooperative and coordinated international action in order to strengthen the economy and development of DL nations through effective disaster management. In this regard, disaster mitigation should be regarded as an important tool in successfully coping with crises at the national and global levels. 1.6. Efforts to mitigate disasters. While we cannot wish away the natural disasters that nature throws up from time to time, we can refer to the efforts for reducing the adverse effects of a disaster on people, structures, and socio-economic systems. Mitigation activities are useful before, during and after a disaster and thus overlap all phases of disaster management. There are two types of mitigation activities, i.e., structural and non-structural. The structural activities include physical steps, such as construction of dams, bridges, disaster-resistant buildings, to protect against disasters. Non-structural activities relate to development of land use plans, zoning laws, training and warning. For the success of mitigation strategy, it should be supported by all stakeholders, viz. the people, government at all levels, non-governmental organizations, academic and research organizations, and the media. The magnitude of damage wreaked by natural disasters can be reduced considerably by adopting the twin strategies of culture of prevention and spirit of cooperation through awareness, knowledge, training and proper use of new technologies. Government of India has adopted both mitigation and prevention components for disaster management. The 10th Five-Year Plan document contained a detailed chapter on disaster management. This document emphasized that development cannot be sustainable without mitigation being built into development process. Hence, disaster mitigation is being institutionalized into development planning. At the national level, National Disaster Management Authority has been constituted under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister. The state governments are establishing similar disaster management authorities at the state level. Necessary legal framework is to be provided through appropriate legislation and human resource development. At global level, the UN General Assembly in 1989 made a decision to launch a far-reaching global program to save lives and reduce the adverse impacts of natural disasters. The decade 1990 to 2000 was declared the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, IGNOU. According to the plan of the IGNOU, it was intended that all countries should develop and prepare comprehensive national assessments of risks from natural hazards, and these assessments should be taken into account in preparing development and mitigation plans at national and local levels. After completion of IGNOU program in 2000, the International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, ISDR, has been adopted. The ISDR has been programmed to take best advantage of the networking and experience gained under IGNOU. The main achievement of IGNOU was to create awareness among the people and policy makers. The ISDR is aimed at upgrading this awareness into realistic action plans, with focus on continuing the efforts to increase awareness, ensuring commitment from public authorities, creating disaster-conscious and disaster-resistant communities, thus reducing loss of lives and socio-economic losses. 1.7 Conclusion. In this unit, we have explained the meaning and nature of natural disasters. It has been emphasized that a disaster retards the development process in the affected area and extends to the neighboring regions also. Various types of natural disasters that occur in India have been described very briefly, and the regional and seasonal profiles of their occurrence have been outlined. It may be noted that every type of natural disaster is dealt with in detail in the subsequent units. Effects of various disasters and the mitigation efforts have been explained thereafter. The twin strategies of culture, of prevention and spirit of cooperation go a long way to mitigate the adverse effects of natural disasters. Thank you. Subscribe our channel for more updates. We will see you with the next chapter.